All right, we're going to start. Just want to welcome everybody. I'm Dr. Heather Friedland, and this is Friedland Family Chiropractic. We just wanted to start off and give you a background on why we even decided to do this. Lots of this came out of conversations that Dr. Amy and I have been having. We work with a lot of families and with a lot of moms and a lot of kiddos that deal with a lot of issues. And we get tons of questions all the time, some of them that we can answer, some of them that we just don't know the answer to. So God kind of put a group of specialists together himself, is how I see it. I'll introduce Drina here in a moment, but she came to us. I've known Carrie for years, and we've been having similar conversations when I've had issues with my own kids or things that have come up with patients. So I just really feel like God put a group of specialists together to help those families that a lot of what we see is this time of year, everybody's excited to go back to school, but there's a group of us that has this little pit in our stomach that maybe it's not as exciting as it looks to everybody else, just because for some kids, school isn't as easy as it should be. Just living life isn't as easy as we feel like it should be. So what we're hoping to do is give you some tools, answer some of those questions, honestly just give you all of us as a resource to reach out to as you encounter some of those issues. I want to tell a story. Really early on, I've been a chiropractor for 18 years. About 6 months into my practice, I started to take care of a lady, great lady, but she just, can you tell when you meet somebody that sometimes they're just not focused on what's really going on? And in the middle of our first visit, I stopped and I said, what is going on? Because I can see that you're having some issues, but I can also see that mentally you are just not here. And she said, I'm just having huge issues with my kids. They're having tons of issues at school and just, I don't even know what to do. So, she was here for herself, but we ended up in a conversation about her boys. She had 2 boys at the time. They were 7 and 8. And I said, you know what? Why don't you bring them in? Let's see what's going on. Let me see if I can do anything. 6 months into my practice, I was way outside my comfort zone and I was really nervous to do it, but I did it. So, they were dealing with ADHD and all of those words that we use. So she shows up with them that first day, and I had an expectation of what I thought I was going to see when I met them, which I thought I was going to see 2 boys off the wall, that it was going to be really difficult. What I got instead were 2 boys that sat next to mom and literally fell asleep while we were talking. And I looked at her and I said, what's going on? And she said, well, they started them on some new medicine last week. And basically what I have boys that are willing to go to school, but then when they come home, they literally sleep until the next morning. Mm-hmm. And it just got me looking at some things and doing some research. And those 2 boys taught me so much in the time that I took care of them, just about what was happening, watching mom try to process all of that. So through that, we just kind of really started to have a heart for those kids that maybe there's no label, maybe there is, but kind of fall into some of those gaps that the world's not exactly sure what to do with. So they kind of started that thought process with me. Over that 18 years, we've taken care of so many kids with so many amazing things, and just really got to watch them come out of some of that and work with parents and figure those things out. So that's one of our big goals. All right, I met Drina. How long ago did we meet Drina? A month ago?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's how this goes, because God's good. So I have a patient who knows a bunch of my patients, who happens to know Drina, who they're in a conversation about what she does and what we do. And Mary hooked the 2 of us up. So Drina and I started to talk. And when I learned about what she does, I was thrilled, because I'm going to tell you how I think it is. But Drina is an expert in testing and IEPs and 504s and all of those crazy questions that I get, that I have to half of the time say, I have no idea how those things work, other than a little bit of experience that I have myself. So what I asked her to do tonight was just to give the basics of what an IEP is, what a 504 is, some of the things that she's seen over her 35 years of experience. Is that?
Oh, at least.
At least 35 years of experience helping families with what she does. So I'm going to let her take over.
But you didn't mention that I met Amy more than a year ago. And I used to come there once or twice or sometimes 3 times a week. Hi. And I'll follow the agenda because I believe that that's why you came. My experience has really been, I started out being a 5th and 6th grade teacher, so I did that for a number of years. Then I became a family counselor, so I did that for a number of years in between babies, and then when the babies became old enough to go to school, preschool, then I became an administrator at a Montessori school, which is where they were going. So I'm a Montessori certified person. I've taught child development with the Montessori community for 40 years. Then I was discovered, as you know, sometimes things like that happen, by this pediatric neuropsychologist who had just a profound experience working with children who had attention deficits, who had dyslexia, who had autism, who had all kinds of sensory needs, and she asked me to be her partner in the business because the gentleman who was her the partner passed away. So she asked me to join her, and that was 35 years ago. So I have become a dyslexia specialist. I'm a play therapist. I'm an autism specialist after the 1.5 years of neuropsych classes that I had taken. At this point, I've just moved up here with my husband. My husband and I, 48 years have been married, and we're out at Lake Somerset. And I continue to, wherever I live, I continue to be able to do the translation reports. The children go to the neuropsychologist, they're evaluated, and then I write the reports to help the schools and the parents understand the children better. Example, I have a 12-year-old today that I worked on who he's brilliant, and that's been identified, but he's also autistic and has tremendous attention deficit and has memory problems as a result, and many sensory issues. I wrote the report for him last year. His mother has called me back this year to meet with the teachers this year. He's in a gifted school, but he's twice exceptional. He's he's tremendously gifted, but he just doesn't get the world of people that goes past him too fast, and he gets overloaded, and that's his world. So I do not directly deal with the legal issues of 504s and IEPs, but I understand my children from my office going off to get those services from the schools. So what I've given you now, I've given you 3 handouts that I felt when I looked on the internet were nice cross-sectionals that might at least get you started with the idea. So I thought I'd walk with you, and I see you've got pens. The first one I wanted to look at with you is understood. We're not going to go through all these tonight. I have 15 minutes, right? And you're going to keep me on target. To first help you to understand the difference between the 504 and the IEP, but to then leave you probably with more that you can look at and after we separate, okay? So the big difference is IEP is an individualized educational plan. In other words, this is a child who cannot be taught in a regular education classroom because in spite of whatever they may try to do, this child needs more individual attention, smaller classroom, a prescription, IEP, an individualized plan, a prescriptive teaching plan. And it could be then that they've been identified with dyslexia, a learning disability. There are all kinds of learning disabilities. They could have a math disability. They could have an organization planning executive function disability. It could be that their attention deficit is so severe that it's interfering with their learning so tremendously that they really need to be in a smaller setting. And in so doing, putting them into this smaller setting, they then get a special education teacher, okay? Once they have that special education teacher, the needs identified, and it's a process that goes on through the school to determine if this child really needs to have special ed. But where they will usually start is what they call the RTI, response to intervention. In other words, I'm a mom. I come in and I say, my child he's having a terrible time in math. We're sure that he has a math disability. We want him to be tested. We want him to get his special education. And they say, ho, wait on. First thing we have to do is to try everything in our little cookbook and see if we can help him to become better at math by adjusting things for him. Does he just need a smaller classroom? Does he need shorter assignments? Accommodations, changes made in the way that he's taught. So let's try all of these different things. We'll try him in a smaller group. We'll see if we try different teaching techniques. Still got the math problem. They may then decide that they're going to test him. And that would then begin that process to find out if he has a learning disability. Then his future is governed by the IDEA, here, let's not jump here. Let's walk together here. We're talking the special ed, that's that first column. And the basic description of special ed, it's a blueprint for a child's special education experience. And we've already gone over the fact that it provides individual specialized instruction for the unique needs of the child. And there's no cost to you, of course. But the IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, is a federal law. It's a federal law for children with disabilities. But they're not real easy to want to offer you those services. They want to be sure that the child actually has a learning disability that requires them to have a special education teacher who gets lots more bucks than the regular classroom teacher in a smaller classroom, sometimes with an aide, but someone who has had specialized instruction for dealing with special education. So, who is eligible? The child who has one or more of the 13 specific disabilities that are listed in the IDEA, which can be from speech and language difficulties, to reading disabilities, to written expression disabilities, to, there's 13 of them. And the disability, and this is really key, must affect the child's educational performance and/or their ability to learn and benefit from the general education curriculum. Therefore, they need special ed. We've tried everything under the sun. This child cannot respond in a regular classroom, so this child needs special education. So the parents can ask the school district to pay for an independent evaluation, but by an outside expert, but the district doesn't have to agree. If the district does not agree, and I run into this all the time, your child, this is key, your child is getting average to above average grades. You may see them struggling, but from our perspective, they're making it okay in general education. So the school district may say, we don't agree. We're not going to test them here. We're not going to pay for you to take them somewhere else to have them tested because they're looking fine. In my experience, sometimes I think they fudge things a little bit so the kid looks fine, even though the kid isn't doing fine, but that's a whole other story. Parents can always pay for an outside evaluation themselves, but the district may not give it much weight. I just was on the phone today. A youngster who has been identified at my office is in Orland Park, identified with high functioning autism. Okay, and this school district is bound and determined that this child, brilliant child, an overall IQ of about 120, 90 to 110 is average. This child's overall IQ is wonderful. He's actually doing very well in school. But his autism is about his attention, his short-term memory, his sensory modulation. He loses it all the time. And he's got a mood then that goes like this. So it's really more the deep brain stuff that's going on. He's got the higher brain stuff, which is what you learn in school with the academics. He's doing okay. But this school district is fighting the diagnosis. So I spoke with the neuropsychologist tonight who had done the testing, and I said, could you please talk to the school district and explain your diagnosis, because they don't get it. I don't know, I think they just don't get it, because there were several tests they asked questions about and they really had no clue what they were asking. You can also find that now parents will pay for the evaluation if you decide to go that route, but often, depending on your insurance may cover some of the cost of that independent testing. So once the child is found to have a disability, a condition that is causing their learning to be interfered with, and they cannot make it in the general education population, then they can decide that this child does indeed have a learning disability, and then they could move forward. Amy and I were talking about domain meetings earlier. The school district has a set process that they have to go through to identify if a child does match the disability qualification. Let's see, they tell you this paper tells you which people should be included in the meeting. The major difference is that for an IEP, you'd have to have the school psychologist or someone who can interpret tests, whereas if it's a 504, which is not special ed, you don't need the psychologist to be there, but you should have the school principal. I always say, get as many of the people in the room as possible who can have an impact on the child's future. Because one of the more frustrating parts of my job at this point, I used to work nose to nose with these people, and I used to work on the floor with the kids and just have a ball, and a lot of hard work too. But when I'm having these school conferences, I can't see their faces. I can't tell when they think this idiot, is their time up yet? Or are they going, I can't see what's going on. But if the room is filled with the principal and the psychologist and the special education person and the classroom teacher, as you see, that's required, and there should be at least one special ed person and at least one general ed person there, and the child's parent, there's going to be somebody in the room that you can I pick up, geez, I was noticing this about this child. And I said, geez, I'm so glad you mentioned that, And then I'll start to kind of play them off a little bit and kind of pull them into the room a little bit, and to try to soften and to try to get them to look at the child and to look at the child's needs. So let's see, there's a regular process that you see, and I thought that this was a very clear process, way to see it. That if you think about the prescription that you get from the doctor, you may end up coming in with a stomach ulcer. Will they give you and you and you all the same prescription? No, even though you may have the same diagnosis. They're supposed to look at the child. They're supposed to prescribe the learning that this child needs by giving specific goals. By this amount of time, we expect this child to be able to do this. And then you have meetings to determine, is the child moving along? And if not, why not? And what are they going to do about it? You know? So the IEP team reviews the IEP at least once a year. More often than not, it happens in the spring. But then if the child has gone through special changes during the summer, it doesn't show up until they go back in the fall, and then you have to kind of tweak them in the fall. I usually recommend that if they have a 504 or an IEP, that 6 weeks after school has started, you ask for a meeting where you say, please, let us sit down. I want his teachers to be here. I want the special ed person to be there, the psychologist, the principal, so that we can take a look at how well is the plan that was designed in the spring actually working for my child now. Because you also get into the issue that, and I guess I have a very strong bias here, a lot of times learning disabilities are not really learning disabilities, they're teaching disabilities. And then if we knew how to teach the child and approach them the way that they really needed, they wouldn't look so disabled. We could manage them with a 504 and without all that special education stuff. And I see heads going along with me. So if your child does have an IEP, you'll see as you look back over this step-by-step idea, and there's plenty of information out there. But there are processes where you can say, we have documentation from this neuropsychologist that our child has been identified with autism, and you folks aren't doing anything about it. We're going to take you to due process. So you can go through the legal process to try to get them to do what you feel really should be done for your child. And it's very, very well spelled out. You'd probably have to get a lawyer or an advocate, or maybe both. Lawyers can be more expensive than advocates. And see if you can win the case to have your child be included in special ed. Or if they have them in their special ed classroom, but your child is regressing, they're going backward, or staying what we call stagnant, just staying in one spot. They're in the special ed classroom, they should be advancing. What's going on here, guys? So you have the right to expect them to step up to the plate. So that's why I suggest that you have a meeting after 6 weeks into school. You, don't forget, you know your child better than anyone else in the world. So if your child's coming home and totally melting down when they come home, oh, they're doing fine at school here, honey. They're just doing so well. But you know when they get home, they're fried because they've held it in all day at school and they can't hold it in anymore, and they let it out when they get home. There's something going on here at school, folks. What are you following the plan that was agreed to? This is what he is saying. This is what she's complaining about. Look, what can we do to make their lives easier? You know, and the ladies here work on easing the system through the chiropractic and through nutrition. But if the child is not eased, they're not going to be able to learn well. So what can you folks at the school do to help them be eased? Then you start the process. Big important rule. From the moment you suspect that your child is learning differently, whether they're going to get a 504 or an IEP, start keeping records of all of the contacts that you have made with people at the school. If it's try to stay away from a phone kind of thing, record it though. Okay, on such and such a date, I spoke with the principal, Mrs. Green, and this is what our conversation entailed. Try to keep things as paper-filled as possible. Even as you go along the line and you're not getting a response, then you may even start sending papers, carbon copying to the superintendent of the school, because the superintendent might not know that all this is going on. So keep your trail, get a big notebook and start keeping all those papers, so you don't lose track, just in case you have a need to. Okay? Now that's learning disability. Okay? And any questions so far, just about what we've kind of run through? Okay, we're going to jump into the other world now, okay? 5 minutes. The 504 plan is there's something that's interfering with the learning of the child. It has not been identified, and the idea is then that they will stay in a general education classroom, but they will have accommodations made for them. Accommodations can, one of the things I was reading, even that they have a sensory break during the day where they get to go to the principal's office and eat carrots because they get that sensory feedback and, the crunching and the heavy pressure. And some days are 4 carrot days and some days are 8 carrot days. So you take a look together with the school at what the problems are and see about getting them the services that they need. So the 504 plan is also a federal law, as you see on the first page, but it's civil rights rather than the special education law through the IDEA. People sometimes think a 504 doesn't have any tooth behind it, and that's not true. You got to make sure that you stand up and expect the school to do it. If they have an IEP, there's a case manager, a special education person, who will contact you in the spring and say, we need to have our annual meeting. 504, not necessarily so. 504, it may be that that it's been agreed that they need extra time, that they need shorter assignments, that they need to sit at the front of the room to avoid distractions, that they need to have no copying from the board if they have visual problems, that they have they are released from their classroom ahead of time so they're not in the hallway with the other kids, that their locker, if they're in junior high, is centrally located so they can have half their books in there in the morning and half their books for the afternoon. It could be that, the whole range of whatever, and many kids who have an attention deficit fall into the category of needing a 504. It's interfering with their learning, but they don't need a special education teacher. But with a 504, you got to make sure that every year, not only do you have this meeting, it's a good idea to have it at the end of the school year, so that everybody who's known your child for the year spiffs up the 504, so that it matches the needs that they have identified while they've gotten to know your child. And then I recommend another meeting in the fall with all the new teachers, because many times because there's no case manager, many teachers don't even know that the child has a 504, and they don't feel the need to follow through. You have to be the advocate. You have to be the case manager. But legally, if you can prove that they had a 504, they were supposed to be doing this, this, and this, and it wasn't being done, you have every right to call the district short on that. There's a federal law that protects this 504. So it's to give the kind of situational help that makes a difference for the child. Now, having the outside testing done by like a place like ours, that generally the school does not fight us about giving 504s because it doesn't require anything more from the budget, okay? All it requires is teachers who give a lick about what they're doing and who understand your child. But you have to help them understand who your child is, okay? And you have to reach their hearts. And sometimes you got to do battle with them, and then you have to get the superintendent be aware that it's not being honored, and then maybe you have to go get some additional advice. But the big thing is to take that child that's in your heart that you see what's going on with them, and to help the school understand. And like this mother, I'm going to be on the phone on Thursday. The mother said, I need you to be there because I'm a former teacher myself, but I am mom. If I'm there, then they listen better to me because I'm a professional who's making the contact. So I would, at this point, I'd have to set up a whole corporation, et cetera, in order to be charging anything. you contact me at my Neurodrina email account and let me know that you'd like to talk. Give me your phone number and maybe even a little bit about your child so that I get an idea of what's going on. And then I'll call you and I'll see if I can at least give you some advice to help you get started, to help you, you know, with my background of all these years, I can help get an idea of, should you get some outside testing? Can you just go in and talk to them? Do you have some testing that they've done at the school, but they're not going to do it if your child's in the average range? You can ask all you want. You have a right to ask. But if your child is not struggling in the school, they have no reason to do anything. So if your child looks average, but you know that they're more than that. Okay? How did I do?
Awesome, thank you.
Okay.
I think one of the big things you said that hits me is that we know our kids, right? So we've met so many parents. I think for me, in all of these situations, the parents become the heroes because they're the ones fighting. You know, you live day in and day out with those kids, so they become the ones that fight and figure out what really works for your kids.
So I'm part of this.
So
May I please, Carrie? Thank you.
I'm going to introduce Carrie. I was going to look up today, Carrie, and see how long we've known each other. How long have we known each other?
I don't know, since I started getting adjusted.
It's been a long time.
I don't know what
I'm going to guess I've known Carrie 7 or 8 years, probably. She and I haven't talked a whole lot about it, but she's helped me a lot. I pick her brain on a regular basis about myself and about my kids. And I think in the last year, we haven't talked about this at all, but I spent the weekend with Carrie at a seminar and just observed how she actually lives her life day in and day out. And I made some major life changes after that weekend. And I never told her that. I'm not going to cry or make you cry. But the thing that I've learned about Carrie is she's smart, like super, super smart. But I've met a lot of smart people that do nutrition that also aren't realistic, I guess would be a word that I use. So one of the things that I love watching her work is that she takes people as individuals where they are, and just really helps them see what they need. We have pushed a lot, she and I, because some of the kids' stuff we're still working on and figuring out together how that looks. But I know how smart she is on it because I have picked her mind about my own kids on multiple occasions. So I'm going to pass this to you. Make sure you take that one or else
This one?
Yes.
Thank you, Heather. I wasn't expecting all of
I
that.
know
You're
you
going to
weren't.
make me cry before I even start talking. My respect for Heather is mutual, and she has helped me in countless ways too with my health. I have my own set of health issues that I come with, a lot of gut issues, autoimmune issues that I have struggled